Gentlemen, saw this as our cue to take leave. This is when we were spotted by one of the polar men. An alarm sounded, and they began chase along with other German soldiers. As we exited, we set off bombs that we had planted on the way down, hoping to trap them in there. But the polar men were just too fast. They ran right through them. I ran in front of my comrade and took this bunker. He took the other. He lured the polar man in and trapped him inside, hoping that they would think he was the only one that survived. And they did just that. He sacrificed his life so one of us could live and tell whoever came to rescue us what happened. All right, men, we make camp tonight and we enter the tunnel tomorrow. We got to finish this once and for all and take the Germans out. I wouldn't advise you go in there, said the soldier, but I can't stop you. And just so you know, Major, the polar men, they'll be back. He shoots a glare off into the distance where the beast disappeared. It's going to be a long night, fellas. Let's make camp. So the soldiers proceeded to set up their tents and then cook over the fire. Camp was pretty quiet that night as they watched the sun fall over the horizon. All right, boys, let's set up a perimeter. They all get up, grab their rifles, and circle all the way around the tent. All 11 men evenly spaced. The last shimmer of sun against the snow was swallowed up by the darkness, and that's when they heard it. The battle cry pierced the night silence and sent chills down all the men's spine. It sounded as if a train was coming straight for them. Then another, and then another, as if they were calling back and forth to each other, getting in position. The calls were getting closer. They were within a quarter mile now, and they were completely surrounding the men. The polar men were using the darkness to their advantage, but luckily the soldiers had set up a perimeter of fires, and they had a couple snow machines that brought them where they were at, and they had floodlights on them. Sets of eyes were reflecting off in the distance. Then suddenly, one final battle cry. They figured it must have been their leader. They started rushing the camp. The beasts were running 40 to 50 miles per hour in 1 foot of snow. It was like nothing the men had ever seen. But they opened fire and gave it all they had. They were within 50 yards of their camp when suddenly one of the beasts dropped. Then another. The barrage of gunfire stopped them in their tracks. They stood and stared. You could see just how human they looked in their eyes. They had intelligence, said one of the soldiers. And without order, they stopped shooting at them. The beast turned around and they ran off. They're headed towards the tunnel, the lone soldier said. It's that way. Well, good job, we stopped them. Now, go get those bodies. He ordered a couple younger guys on the team to go retrieve them. Once they got them back, they couldn't believe their eyes. The beasts were absolutely fierce looking, but they had very human characteristics. Too human. These are no Sasquatch, one of them said. They look like they were once human. The scientist on the crew stood in awe and was just jotting down note after note. Could these be human hybrids, Doc? Said the major. Could they actually be half man, half beast? The scientist didn't respond. He just looked up, looked back at his paper, and kept writing. All right, team, that's enough commotion for tonight. Go ahead and try to get some shut-eye. We got a big day tomorrow. Needless to say, the team didn't get much sleep after what they saw the previous night. Regardless, they knew what they had to do. It was their duty to shut down whatever was going on deep in that tunnel. The next morning, they trekked the 5 or so miles across the frozen tundra that was between them and the dry lands, where the location of the tunnel was. 2 of the men were chosen to stay behind. Though disappointed, they were needed just as much as the men going into the base. Those bodies had to be preserved for science. Once they got to the tunnel entrance, the men were in awe. It was perfectly cut, almost as if the walls were made of marble. As the 9 of them entered the tunnel and trekked for miles, they began their reconnaissance, laying mines the entire way. They brought enough explosives to topple the entire tunnel, plus the cavern they spoke of. At first, they walked in the pitch black, but after 4 or so hours, they noticed a light in the distance. Eventually, they made it to the vast, artificially lit cavern, and they saw Germans and the polar men everywhere. After almost 2 days of reconnaissance and observing, they targeted the places that they were going to set up the explosives. The top 2 being the petrol dump and a large generator that was used for their scientific experiments. The mission was to place enough explosives throughout the cavern so that once detonated, would not only topple the entire cave, but would also take out any soldiers that may pursue in the process. Once we did this, along with gathering substantial proof that the base actually did exist, We were good to go. So they headed up the tunnel getting ready to detonate. But of course, they were spotted by one of the polar men. So them and the Germans gave chase. The team thought they had set up enough obstacles at the tunnel entrance to slow them so they would be taken out too. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. They were still hot on their tail, and it was a firefight all the way out of the tunnel. Only 3 of them made it out that day, the Norwegian, the scientist, and Felix, along with the 2 on guard. The others sacrificed themselves so we could get out. Upon reaching the safety of the dry lands, they detonated the rest of the explosives, and the tunnel was closed permanently. Suspiciously, very little of the technology and evidence gathered made it out, almost as if on purpose. That story would never make it into the history books, said Felix. They would call the tunnel a geological phenomenon made by a glacier, and the polar men the subject of soldiers gone crazy. The boys that lost their lives would get no recognition, and neither would I. But of course, for the next 5 years, the Royal Navy would practice routine flights over the area, just to make sure. And this would go down as Great Britain's secret wars in Antarctica. This interview was actually done in, I want to say, the early 2000s. A gentleman talked to the vet. I called him Felix. He didn't give a name, but this is the story that he gave, allegedly. Because as you know, all my stuff's for entertainment purposes only. I hope you enjoyed. Keep on keeping on. Keep watching. Stay tuned. Stay in the love. Stay in the light. Be kind to others. I am out.